Hello, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we bring together a panel with diverse views on important issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to our format, let me introduce the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then turn to the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of each segment, I give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground, and I put in my views on the topic. We also, time permitting, have some special features, including our announcement segment, innovative ideas, and closing commentary. And as is typical during this season every 2 years, we're trying to get as many candidates on our panel as possible. And tonight we actually have an all-candidate panel, and what's particularly exciting about it, it's all first-time panelists on Common Ground and also first-time candidates for public office, and they're in 3 different races. We have a very exciting panel and a very exciting set of topics. And so without further ado, let me introduce this evening's panel. Sue Flicop, nice to meet you, Sue.
Thank you for having me.
Is running for school committee member from Ward 7, and our viewers are very sophisticated, so they know this, but all of the school committee seats are elected citywide, and of course the Alderman-at-Large seats are elected citywide. So Sue, all 3 of the people who are running tonight, or on the panel tonight, are running for seats that are elected citywide. Mm-hmm. And Sue, you've got experience working with some nonprofits and volunteering in the community?
Yes, volunteered PTO Council, work with Newton Community Service Center, the Newton History Museum. I've been on the League of Women Voters. I've done a lot of community work. Okay,
great. Well, thank you for your public service, and thank you for being a candidate for public office. Lee Seidler.
How you doing, Ken?
Great to see you, Lee. Thanks for being on the show. Lee is running for the school committee seat from Ward 8. Well, why don't you talk about your professional background and relevant experience for a minute?
I work at Seidlen at the Chestnut Hill Mall. I'm a manager there. I'm also continuing with my education at Harvard's extension program and the graduate program. So, you know, with this going on, I'm very positive about myself and the future of Newton.
Great. Thanks, Lee. Welcome. And Ruthanne Fuller.
Nice to be here.
Great to have you on the panel. Ruthanne is running for one of the 2 Alderman-at-Large seats from Ward 7, and in addition to that has served on many of our city committees and commissions. I know Ruthanne was the vice chair of the Citizens Advisory Group, and before that you were a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission.
Correct.
And also you have a professional management background. Do you want to talk about that?
After graduating from Harvard Business School, worked for many years doing both strategic planning and financial management in both the for-profit and the nonprofit sectors.
Great. Well, we have a very diverse and interesting panel that have all been involved in the community, so this should be a great discussion. So without further ado, let's dive right into our first topic. Topic number 1, school repairs. Do not allow or fix them now. What the question refers to is Mayor Cohen has a policy of limiting borrowing or bonding for school repairs and expansion. In other words, all school-related borrowing, aside from the Newton North project, to $1.75 million a year. He has a similar policy for all city borrowing relating to city buildings and streets, so the total in any given year cannot exceed $3.5 million. The question that was raised recently by members of the school committee as to whether they could do more than the $1.75 million this year, because in addition to their plan to replace some aging boilers and windows and doors and roofs, they encountered a space problem in Oak Hill Middle School, and to address that, the plan is to build 4 modular classrooms to add those onto the school, which would cost another $1.2 million beyond the $1.75 million. So there's been a great deal of discussion in the community, and I know that the school committee will be taking up this issue at next Monday's meeting. And so my question to the panel is simply, does that $1.75 million limitation make sense? Or should the mayor in the city go beyond it? Sue, what do you think?
Well, I guess I'd start by saying there's a lot of need out there. There's definitely a lot. The 1.75 that was planned with the boilers and the roofs and the windows and doors, there were still other boilers and windows and doors that could be done, and it's always been limited. So I guess there's certainly the need for more cash. It would be very easy to use some of that money directly on capital expenses for the schools. My concern is that we really have no plan on doing that. We don't have a really well thought out capital plan for the city at large where the schools fit in. And I think either the current mayor or a new mayor is going to have to look at what it means financially for the city in order to bond further out. I mean, we're going to be facing some really tough years. And so I guess for me, I'd really like to see if the mayor does bond more, exactly what does that mean for the city? Are there going to be other cuts? Are there trade-offs that we need to make in the future?
Well, I mean, I guess just to boil down the question, though,
Yeah.
There has to be a yes or no policy change whether or not we stick with the 1.75 million cap or we get rid of the cap. Which do you think we should do?
Well, like I said, I feel like I don't have enough information to make that decision right now. If it's a...
The school committee will be voting on Monday night on a capital plan, from what I
Well, they're
understand.
voting on their capital plan, but the mayor...
Well, no, but the thing to be clear about is Mike Cronin, the chief of operations for the schools, submitted the original $1.75 million capital plan, and the school committee cut $1.2 million from that. He submitted a second one that
Right.
that only had $550,000 of the original project,
Right.
and had $1.2 million for the
modulars.
So the question is, which should the city do this year? The full $2.95 million worth of projects, or just the 1.75 million? You don't have a view on it. That's
Well,
fine.
no, I do. I'm waiting for Monday night. I still haven't heard the case for the modulars, to be honest with you.
Okay.
My children go to Oak Hill, so I have a lot at stake here, but
Sure.
I do want...
You're skeptical about whether they're actually needed, then?
Well, first I want to hear the case. I want
Okay.
to see what other options there might be that they've considered. I'm wondering if there is some sort of halfway point.
Okay.
Do they need all 4 modulars right away? I'd like to
Okay.
see what other options they've
Great.
considered.
Thank you, Sue. Lee, what do you think?
Well, these projects that were originally allocated for the 1.7 million are high priority projects. And now some of that money is being taken away to pay for the Oak Hill Modular. And so I feel like there should be still a way to pay for the rest of those high priority projects. And if it means we need another bond or we need to get rid of the cap for bonding for temporary time span, I think that should be looked at.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. What do you think, Ruthanne?
This is a great question and a very important question. Both your question is specifically about the school side tonight, but it could apply to the schools or the city.
Feel free to answer both if you like.
I'll go a little bit, and there's really 2 parts to your question. Are we spending enough on maintenance and repair and renewal, and then how do we pay for it? How much goes into bonding versus straight out of your operating budget? And we have been consistently underspending on capital projects and specifically school buildings for years now, which in the $1.75 million is an artificially low ceiling. Then the question is, how do you pay for it, whether you do it with bonding or straight out of the operating budget? I also believe that we have been under bonding. For many years it was a 3% of revenues rule for bonding. We're actually up to about 5%. This year we've moved from about 68 million to 110 million in bonding in the last 2 years. But there's still room to grow. When we look at comparative communities, we have room to actually increase our bonding and keep a wonderful AAA rating from Moody's.
Right. So I just to understand where you're coming down on this, Ruthanne, you believe that the 1.75 million that's spent on school capital should be increased, and that it should be increased via increased borrowing, increased bonding?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that. So sounds like we have 2 people who agree and 1 who's not persuaded yet entirely. So we get to use our format.
Okay.
I guess I'll obviously sue and let you talk directly to Ruthanne about Ruthanne, why don't you tell Sue why you think the cap should be raised or from 1.75?
Well, first of all, I'm going to agree with Sue because I think why Sue is reluctant to come out and say yes forcefully is because we don't have a thoughtful capital investment plan for the city. We don't have a long-term vision of the city that's driving what capital projects we should be doing, in what order and when. And I suspect, I don't want to put too many words, you're a bit nervous, is this the highest and best use of the funds? And there's very little in our
That's
planning
actually
process.
not the question I'm asking, is whether the modulars are the highest and best use of the
Okay,
funds.
yeah.
Whether
Good.
we should be borrowing more for capital, and putting aside
Right.
what the particular
I
project
guess
is.
my big concern is, you know, the economy's just in the tank right now. And I was at a meeting where I heard that a lot of the federal stimulus money that the state's using, or that the state got, they're using actually to fill in the FY09 budget and to help with the FY10 budget. And so there's not going to be much more in the future. So I'm guessing, that there are going to be a lot of cuts in state money that come in. And I know Newton doesn't get that much, but it's enough to make a difference. And I feel like without really planning in the future financially, then how do we know that bonding now is the best thing? It's going to lead to cuts at some point in the future, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not sure what that means, what those trade-offs are going to be, and how that's going to work.
And we are going to have to make trade-offs and difficult choices.
Yeah.
We're spending about $30 million a year on both the city and school side on capital infrastructure, maintenance, repairs, renewals. We need to be doubling that. We should be spending $60 million out of a $300 million budget. So it's big numbers that we're talking about and difficult trade-offs. And thankfully, we do have some room in our bonding capacity to absorb some of that, but it does flow to your operating budget. Bonding is not free.
Just out of curiosity, are you
Right.
counting the Newton North project in that $30 million? Because I don't believe we're anywhere near $30 million of repair and maintenance and renovation of existing.
Actually, we are.
Really?
If you add up on both the city side and the school side, excluding Newton North, you're at
Really?
about 30 million. But it's still way too low, even if you,
Yeah, okay,
even if,
well,
we'll check the number,
I
we'll
thi- I
go
think-
through the
yeah.
numbers.
There's no argument for me on the need.
Right.
There's a
Okay.
huge
Right.
need. I worry. I know the CAG report said that we can go higher, and I do trust that advice, but there's a part of me that says I want to see some projections. What does this mean in year 2, in year 3? Especially now that the state's also suffering, and that's also going to come back to us in some way that we couldn't predict before.
And as you're saying, bonding is not free.
No.
You end up having to repay the principal and the interest, so it affects the operating budget. It does have a cost.
I am very curious about that $30 million figure, since, of course, the mayor has a cap of $3.5 million of non-Newton North related bonding. Our free cash expenditures on repair and replacement have been negligible, and our operating budget has somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, a few $100,000 for public buildings, and a little bit more if you count our highway crews in public works. But
Remember, the 30 million includes buildings, which is both school and municipal, roadways,
right, no.
equipment. It's the full
Oh, you're talking about purchase of trucks. You're talking
that
about
would of major
Right.
equipment.
You're talking
would be that.
You're talking about a
So-
combination of what we're
It's all
actually spending
capital
on maintenance is
infrastructure.
only a small fraction of that.
Correct. And in fact, maintenance is a severe problem. In fiscal year 2007, the school has an arcane term for this, school charter maintenance,
Yeah.
was at 2.5 million, which was too low. It went down to 1.9 million this last fiscal year. We're headed in the wrong direction.
Well,
So
and
actually, maintenance needs to increase.
And they've always tried to focus, whenever there's a budget crunch, they really try to focus on the classroom and keeping the classroom whole, the integrity of it. And that has meant, it's been a struggle for them to level fund charter maintenance. And so, they've had some real issues. And I know it's a huge problem. I want to see a little bit of planning before I'm ready to jump on board. I want to know that we know where we're going instead of sort of being a reactive kind of decision.
So let me ask Ruthanne, why did you feel comfortable as a member of the Citizens Advisory Group recommending increasing that percentage, understanding that there were trade-offs involved? What brought you to that conclusion that was the right thing to do?
We used a lot of different ways to triangulate on what the appropriate amount of spending is for the city of Newton. We have $1.2 billion of assets in the city, and there's a lot of ways you can get to the correct standard of what the spending should be to maintain and renew and replace those assets. And by using 2 or 3 different methods, it all came to about the same figure of about $60 million. And by the way, you can see it. You know, walk down our sideways, drive down our roads, go into our school buildings, go into the library. Some of this is invisible, but it's becoming more visible.
Well, I'm going to let Lee back into the conversation here. Lee, you've heard the hesitancy, I guess I could call it, that Sue has to jump on board the idea of increasing our borrowing for capital. What makes you comfortable with it, and how would you explain your thinking with respect to it? And also, you said something interesting in your initial comment, that maybe we should just do this temporarily.
Yeah.
Are you persuaded by Ruthanne's comments that we should, on an ongoing basis, do more capital work?
I do believe that for the temporary, fiscal year 2010, 2011, with the Oak Hill modulars going up, because obviously that's going to be voted for, we have to take care of these high priority items that exist with these other school systems. They are going to still be there a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now, and it's not something that can just be ignored. So we have to pay attention to it. And if we take care of the problems now, it might cost less in the future. So I think there might be a little more investment now, but then it could be a lot of cost savings in the future.
Okay. Well, anyone else have anything they want to add on this topic? Or
Can I add one oddball thing? We were talking about Mayor Cohen's current policy. There's another thing to keep in mind. I'm going to read it because I'll never remember it. The Newton Charter, which calls for, there's a specific section, 4.3, that tells what the school committee's responsibilities are. It has unusual wording, and the powers of the school committee include providing ordinary maintenance and repair on all school buildings up to a maximum expenditure equal to 2% of the school department's operating budget. And if they want to go above that, it requires a 2/3 vote of the aldermanic board.
I wish they'd ask for that more often.
Wouldn't that be great?
Charter maintenance.
Well,
because
the irony, of course, is that when the original Charter Commission wrote the charter, that was a minimum, but there was a ballot question a couple of years later because they didn't want to keep having to do the minimum. And Florence Rubin and the other people who were on that Charter Commission were absolutely outraged by the twisting of that and the reversal of it. And I know that there are people who, if we have further charter reform, want to make it a minimum again. There's no point in having a maximum. But anyway, I'm sorry, do you have...
Well, I just want to add, I've seen somewhere the figure, I've heard it, that spending $1 today in capital expenses saves $5 later, I think it was, in maintenance expenses. And so I think that has to enter into the calculation.
I think we're at $5 in maintenance. $1 in maintenance today will save $5 in repair.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, so I had it wrong. Okay, so that shouldn't enter into
it's right.
No, but
the principle is correct.
Right.
If you anyway.
It's something to think. I think it should enter into the conversation or the calculation when figuring out if it's worthwhile.
I think I'm going to wrap up this topic so that we can stay on schedule. I think that the point that Lee made towards the end of the conversation is the key one, that there is a tremendous savings, and I guess Sue was alluding to that too by quoting that 1-to-5 ratio, is that if we neglect the replacement of these aging boilers and these windows, we will pay far more in energy costs. And you think about it, if a boiler in an elementary school fails in the middle of winter, then you have much higher costs to replace it. Plus, there is another cost. There's a cost to the disruption, calling the parents to pick up their kids on a snowy day, and the roads are covered with snow, and they're at work, but you have to shut down the school because there's no heat in the building. So I think the short-sightedness of this artificial $1.75 million cap is very expensive, both in terms of the increased energy costs associated with it and in terms of what the effect on the quality of the services and the quality of life in the city. And so my hope is that we will persuade Mayor Cohen to relax this artificial cap. And to give you an idea of what the cap means in the context of our overall borrowing, The mayor has said $1.75 million for schools other than Newton North High School. He said $1.75 million, as Ruthanne points out, not only for all buildings in the city, but streets, trucks, all other capital items. So that's $3.5 million for everything in the city that we can borrow in a year other than Newton North High School. At the same time, we're borrowing more than $40 million for Newton North High School, so more than 10 times as much. So in the scheme of things, the amount we're borrowing for other capital projects is rather small. And my suggestion is that if we do the actuarial analysis, we'll find that from the energy savings, we can justify these repairs. We can justify fixing a roof on the basis of how much will it cost to repair the water damage to the building if the roof leaks. We can justify replacing a boiler or old windows that don't close, thinking about how much more fossil fuels we're going to burn and how much that's going to cost us in the long run. So I really think that the cap should be lifted both for the short-term needs for these projects, but also in the long run, because I think the Citizens Advisory Group has it exactly right. And I think it's very generous to say that we're doing $30 million of this work a year. I don't know what kinds of things got lumped into that figure, but some of them really, I don't think, quite fit the category of repair and maintenance. Anyway, so I agree with, I think, the gist of where the panel was going, and I do hope that the school committee manages to persuade the mayor to do both lists of capital projects this year. Okay, we ordinarily have our announcement segment at this point. I'm not going to make a lot of announcements. As folks know, I've been a little busy with some other projects, so I haven't had a lot of time to maintain the Common Ground website. But there is a good calendar of events on, nothing good on commongroundtv.com really now. Okay, so yeah, there's a good calendar of events on my website, parker2009.org. And there's some links to some other interesting materials relating to the topics we're discussing, including a letter signed by, I believe, 15 candidates for office and current elected officials urging the mayor to reconsider his cap on capital spending. So there's some interesting information there. The only announcement I'll make is that our next show will be August 6th. And so that'll be our next live show, and we'll have another table full of panelists. So let's keep moving along to our second topic. Topic number 2, local option taxes. Hike is too rash, or we need the cash. Lee, I'm going to let you lead this one off. These are 2 local option taxes that have been passed by the legislature and that Mayor Cohen would like to implement in Newton. The first is to change the current hotel and motel tax from 4% to 6%. And the second one is to implement a 0.75%, in other words, 0.75% local meals tax. And so my question to the panel is, should we adopt these local option taxes? One of them, both of them, neither of them? What do you think, Lee?
I don't believe we should opt for these local taxes because I think in the long run it hurts businesses. It goes out to the consumers, where the goal of the Newton Center Task Force is to have more people come into Newton Center and go to the shops and go to the restaurants, and that's going to be a little more difficult if there's going to be a tax in the city, especially for the meals tax, because that's going to come down. And right now restaurants are already hurting. Do we want to hurt them more than they're actually going through right now? So that's something right there. Hotel meals tax. Hotel motel tax. Maybe that's something to look at, is a separate issue, but I wouldn't want to hurt restaurants right now.
Okay, thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ruthanne?
Well, they're absolutely clear that we need more revenues in the city of Newton. We've got a gap between, our revenues are growing at a slower rate than our expenses, and so we do need more revenues. And the hotel motel tax would bring in $360,000 is the projection, slightly over that, and another $800,000 in the meals tax. But I share Lee's concern. There's 2 parts to this. We are in the middle of a recession, and both our residences and our businesses, our residents and our businesses are suffering. And it would be a shame to raise particularly the meal tax if our neighbors do not. Remember, we don't operate in a vacuum here. If Watertown, Boston, Wellesley don't increase their taxes, and we do, we are putting our businesses at a competitive disadvantage. And in fact, that $800,000 in meals tax would be paid largely, not completely, by Newton residents. So it is a tax on ourselves. But there's a second reason which makes me uncomfortable with this. I don't think I wouldn't support an override right now. This is a form of an override. I think we have to earn the right to increase the taxes by being on a pathway towards increased productivity and efficiency in the city. We're not there yet. So I'm very anxious to get the increased revenues, but I would look very closely to see what our neighbors are doing and not jump the gun on them.
Well, the mayor is asking the Board of Aldermen to vote on this in the next month. The Finance Committee will be voting as early, presumably, as Monday, and the full Board of Aldermen at the meeting in the beginning of August. If you were on the board now, Ruthanne, would you vote yes or no?
I'd be a reluctant no, in that I really think we need the revenues. I would rather push it off, see what some of our neighboring cities and towns do, and bring it back up in, let's say, September, when the board reconvenes after the summer break.
Okay. Thanks, Ruthanne. What do you think, Sue?
Well, it's interesting listening to the two of you ahead of time, because I had my thoughts in my head, but I think there's some validity in your argument. I guess for me, I know it's difficult out there. I know that the businesses are also facing an increase in the sales tax, and so it feels like maybe an unfair burden on the business community, but we are really struggling. Some of that $1.16 million is going to go to close the municipal budget gap, I think. Something like $360,000. Right. And what would happen if we don't close that gap? What other cuts we need to make? We don't know. You know, it has to be closed somehow. So I guess for me, it's. I think one of your peers called it a hold your nose kind of vote, and I think it is. I don't think it's great. It doesn't make me happy, and it's asking businesses in the community to sacrifice. But in some way, someone's got to sacrifice because we're short money, and so. I guess I would be willing to support this, but I think Ruthanne had an interesting point about waiting and seeing what our fellow communities do. I think that's...
You're rushing to find common ground already. I appreciate that.
No, well, I was sitting here listening, and I thought, you know, that's a really good point.
That's what we try to do around this table.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that.
But I am actually going to let Lee and you talk about this, because there was... I mean, last time we had different pairings.
That means you two have to disagree next time.
Yeah, and if you don't, well, then Sue gets an extra round, I guess. Lee, why don't you talk to Sue, explain your concerns about what would be the effect on business, particularly you mentioned restaurants, of having the 0.75% meals tax increase?
Well, with the economy struggling as it is, it hurts to raise taxes on businesses, particularly restaurants at this time. The question is it going to, is the cause of increasing taxes going to be giving more money to the government, or is the net effect going to be negative towards businesses, so that the production that they're able to do and their investments that they're able to do is limited? So that's just my main concern there.
So it's a 0.75% increase in the...
So it would go from 5 to 5.75%.
Okay. And then the hotel motel tax, what is it now?
From 4 to 6%. So it's a 50% increase.
And that... You've got to think that hotel motels, that's actually being paid by people who are out of town. They might be related to people in town, but they are out-of-towners, and the restaurants would be more likely. I have to admit, all along, I've been willing to support the flexibility for cities and towns to make these choices. And now that we're actually faced with it, I understand that there are valid arguments both ways. I would even propose some sort of compromise. We do want to close that municipal budget gap. is there a way to do the hotel motel tax? Because it seems like, I don't know if you would be comfortable with that.
You can do one, but not the other.
Well, you
They're
have-
two different votes.
So, okay, so you could do the hotel motel tax and then wait and see what happens with the restaurant tax. Or you don't have to do the full 2% either for the restaurant tax, do you? I mean, the mayor's asked you.
The full 0.75%, you could do less than that on the restaurant tax.
Okay. I think when you're actually faced with the ability to do it in a down economy, it was different when we were talking about it and the economy was booming. It seemed like, okay, we can handle that. But it is a little worrisome on top of the increase in the sales tax to see how it goes. Maybe there should be a staggered pattern to bring these things to life.
What do you think, Lee? Does a staggered pattern sound good to you? So you mean adopt one now and then adopt the other?
Well, we've got the sales tax happening, the increase in the sales tax for the state. I mean, the city's.
Oh, right.
The city might see a little bit of that.
So you're saying the city shouldn't increase taxes at the same time the state is?
I'm saying there's a cumulative effect on the business community, and not just a dollar sense, but also in the sense of being willing to collaborate and work with people and recognize that there's a difficult economy. But I'm actually quite swayed by the idea of seeing what happens with neighboring communities with a restaurant.
So wow, we are achieving all kinds of common ground very rapidly here. Lee, anything else on this, or?
No, I just gotta agree with Ruthanne, about making sure that we cut as much as possible from the government before we decide to raise taxes. If there's a way to, budget, so that government stays limited, without having increased taxes, that should be looked at first before deciding to go towards any kind of tax increase.
Can I just add one thing? I think whatever we do, there really needs to be some confidence from that the government can show the community. There needs to be some confidence they create that the money's being spent wisely, that it's not just, there's still some inefficiencies there. And so I think it needs to be quite clear if you end up voting for this tax, that it's very clear where the money is exactly going and what we're going to get for it. And I think that's only fair to the business community and to the people that are actually going to be contributing those tax dollars. I think we want, it's a long road to establishing more confidence in the government, and I think if this does happen, then there really needs to be some openness about exactly what's coming in and what's going out and how it's being spent.
Okay.
Actually, I agree with that position.
Okay, wow, common ground all over the place. And you've already agreed with Ruthanne. Ruthanne, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
And the good news is that the Board of Aldermen, actually it's two separate votes. The meals tax is a separate vote from the hotel motel. So one could vote yes right now for the hotel motel tax, which affects at least Newton residents a little bit less. Unfortunately, it's the smaller dollar figure by almost a third. And then
and the other thing is, of course, I wonder to what extent we're dealing with a moving target, because the hotel motel tax is based on room occupancy rates.
Right.
And if the economy is worse, or if we have higher taxes than, say, Waltham, does someone say, oh, it's a little bit cheaper to stay at the hotel there, and we lose room occupancy? Right. It is a competitive environment.
It is.
Do those numbers, have they been updated so they reflect the current economy, or are those?
They are the estimates of the current administration. So
from when?
No, recently.
Okay.
They just did them
produced
in the last
recently, but they have not been independently analyzed to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
Correct.
I don't know that the Citizens Advisory Group or anyone else looked at them other
I
than...
will say, if the economy hadn't tanked, I'd say we needed to do it. I don't know how the rest of you feel. If it would be a little more palatable if we weren't facing such difficulty.
Well, I guess I'll wrap up the subject. It seems like our format worked splendidly here. We had some initial disagreement. Sue coming into the room ready to support it, it sounded like, and others talking and finding some common ground. I actually think that there's a couple of things we can do to make these tax increases more palatable, but I wouldn't support them without these measures, and I'd still be a little hesitant for all of the reasons that folks around the table mentioned. I think of imposing a cost on a business the same way I think of any kind of a business deal. In other words, you want to get something for your money, and so what I'd like to be able to do is to say to the business community, we need more revenue. What would you like in exchange for that revenue? And one of the things I've heard from a lot of restaurant owners in the city is that they don't have the ability to have enough seats, not because they don't have enough space, but because they're limited by our zoning ordinances, which are kind of archaic. And in fact, seating for restaurants is based on something called phantom parking credits. It has nothing to do with the actual demand for parking of the business. It has everything to do with what was in that space prior to the restaurant being there. And so by making that process a little more rational and giving, for example, maybe a 10-seat credit for being near public transportation, I think we could help the businesses, the restaurants, far more than we'd hurt them with that 0.75% additional sales tax. So my first criteria is to make sure that we're not hurting businesses in a down economy. We're giving them something positive in exchange for the increased tax, something that they value and helps their business. The second thing that I'd like to see is I worry about this structural deficit that was described by the Blue Ribbon Commission and discussed by the Citizens Advisory Group. The structural deficit rests primarily in the fact, as Malcolm Salter, the chair of the Citizens Advisory Group, refers to it, as the 80-80 rule, the fact that 80% of our revenue is from these local receipts and 80% of our costs is employee compensation, salary and benefits, and of course pensions that we pay out. And I do not want to see these local option taxes used as an excuse to increase the structural deficit. In other words, to increase the payroll and the salary obligations and health benefit obligations of the city. So I would only support them on, first of all, the first condition I mentioned, but also on the second condition that we set up a special capital stabilization fund that's used exclusively to close the structural deficit, and by that I mean for repair and maintenance of city facilities, for capital projects, like replacing those aging boilers. So these topics sort of fit together a little bit there. If we were to do that, then we wouldn't be imposing a burden on future generations. We'd be starting to chip away at that $300 million capital liability that we have in the city now. So I'm not persuaded that I'll get either. I've proposed both of these things, and they've been docketed with the Board of Aldermen. I'm not persuaded that they will necessarily pass quickly, but I am confident that we'll have a very good discussion of them, and I don't know, zoning amendments tend to take a while to get passed, and so it's unlikely that if the mayor pushes for a vote soon on these, that I'll be comfortable voting for them, because my view is that we've got to make sure that in this down economy we don't hurt businesses and that we don't add to our structural deficit. That was almost a little bit of an innovative idea, so I think I'll skip over our innovative ideas segment. Maybe we'll go to another one at the end of the show if we have a little time remaining. But in the meantime, let's move to topic number 3. Topic number 3, schools as good as ever, or to improve them we should endeavor. The gist of this topic is I've been, of course, since I'm running for mayor, walking around the city, knocking on a lot of doors, standing in front of grocery stores, talking to people all around Newton. And one thing that I hear from a lot of people is, I went to the Newton Public Schools, I graduated, and some of them will say 1950-something, and some of them it's 1990-something, but and everything in between, or even some past 1990. But the gist of what a lot of them have to say is that the schools are not as good as they were when I was a student here, in some cases not as good as they were when my children were students in the 70s, and in some cases not as good as they were when they had a great reputation and I decided to move to Newton because of that reputation. Now, on the other side of this argument, there are some people who say, oh, it's just a lot of complaining, nothing's ever good enough for Newton residents, there were problems then too. And so my question to the panel is, are our schools in decline at all? Are they not as good as they used to be? If so, what can we do about it? And if not, what can we do to make them even better? So you get to start this one off.
And I recognize that I'm running for the Board of Aldermen, and all three of you, if you win your positions, will all be sitting on the school committee. So
ironic that you have to start
right,
this one
exactly.
off. Sorry. I should have started from the other side of the table with the
Nonetheless,
first one,
I'm very passionate about the schools, and they're absolutely the heart and soul of the city. So I'm happy to wade into this. It's clear that there are signs of erosion in the schools at the moment, and things that we need to be concerned about, and you as either a mayor or as school committee members, there's a lot of work to be done.
And aldermen should be concerned about this too.
And they should be. There, in my mind, I see diminished administrative and supervisory capacity to help teachers improve, and teachers are the key to quality education. We've got shrinking professional development opportunities for our teachers. Our investment in technology is woefully behind. Our building maintenance, as we've already talked about tonight, is underfunded, and we're clearly seeing increases in class size. All of those are worrisome to me. And you want me to go on and talk a little
I think you've answered the basic question,
Right.
and you'll have an opportunity, I'm pretty confident,
Right.
very soon to talk more about this. So basically your answer is there has been some decline.
There are things to be worried about, and signs of erosion.
Signs of
for sure.
erosion. Okay, I won't
Yes.
characterize. I'll quote. All right, Sue, what do you think? Are any downhill slope here?
Well, first of all, I think no matter what happens, we always need to be striving to be the best school system, the one we want to be. We always pride ourselves on having been the best in, I don't know, the 60s or 70s. But after so many years of budget cuts, it's inevitable that things are lost. You know, in the years that I've been here, I've seen professional development cut. I've seen libraries cut but then restored. And you know, I've seen some curriculum cut, some of the small segments of curriculum. There's a fashion design curriculum at Newton North that was cut. And so I think that's what happens. That's the inevitability of having limited resources and not being able to live within our means. And so, but that said, we can still be trying to do things better. But we just have less of everything. We've lost foreign languages in the elementary schools.
So Sue, just to clarify, are you saying that our schools have declined, but that's the inevitable consequence of lack of adequate resources?
Yeah, well, I think we've lost some of the things that people have valued in the schools.
Because we haven't been able to increase the school budget enough each
Well,
year.
because we haven't been able to live within our means, whatever that takes. Whether you know, we still should always strive to be better than we are. You know, even if we consider ourselves at the very top, we still need to be trying. But we have lost things along the way.
Okay, Lee, what do you think?
I believe that the decline can be measured by MCAS scores, which at 10th grade level, the Newton school system ranks 62nd on English and also 42nd in math. So obviously, and then if you look at it from 2002, there's been a decline into its present position. So there has been a decline in what's being taught. You know, I don't know if it's the content material or not. I think one way to solve this problem is to develop a stronger teacher development program. The Days of Early Release program has not really worked effectively at training teachers so they can know how to implement different programs to help students. I think the next school committee will have to look at ways of developing stronger teacher programs so that whatever they decide to focus on, it can be taught effectively.
Okay, well, it sounds like there is sort of a consensus around the table that there is some decline. I guess I'm going to pick up on the question Sue raised. Is it primarily driven by the finances, or is it more of a management question about choices, priorities, other teacher quality?
Yep.
Lee, since you've raised some other issues, let me let you respond to what Sue brought up, and then we'll go around the table again. Do you think it's a financial problem that's caused this?
I don't believe it's completely dependent on a financial problem. I think finances are important if you want to implement a program like differentiated instructions, which I believe the CAG suggested it would cost about $600,000 to implement that program. But I think it has to do with what's being taught in the classroom. There should be more focus on making sure students are learning what is in the frameworks that the state says, which Massachusetts says should be taught. I think that's a good way of measuring whether students are progressing on a year-to-year basis. So I think that's important. MCAS is important. It should be looked at, and also whenever the school improvement plans that come out, it should be looked at whether MCAS is improving at each individual school.
Ruthanne, you've been involved in all these financial related
Right.
groups, but you've also have a perspective on the school system in terms of the end product of the students and the quality of the experience of the well, I mean, do you have kids? I don't know whether you have kids in the schools or
Nope, all three are going to be in college in the fall.
You have had kids in the schools relatively recently then?
In school, but not in Newton recent. No,
okay.
not in Newton.
Not in Newton,
Right.
okay. But, well, because you were in Brookline probably, then.
Right.
Right. So, I guess here's the question. Forget the premise of
No problem.
the preface, I should say. Do you believe that the decline that you described, I'm sorry, I won't, now I'm misquoting you, the erosion in the Newton Public Schools is primarily financial in nature or caused by lack of finances, or are there other causes that can be addressed?
I think we're going to be operating in a situation where there will be financial pressure on the schools. There has been in the past, and there will be going forward. There's plenty of opportunity to improve the management, but we're also going to have to rethink the educational model because of the financial pressure. In terms of management, I'll just throw out one example. We need to be examining rigorously and regularly all of the educational programs, and an area like special education, which accounts for about 20% of the school budget, has not been looked at in depth in a decade. It's time to do that now, and it should be regularly done in any event. And that happened to single out special education. You could list any number of other areas that need this kind of in-depth analysis done. But that's talking about working within the current model. My sense is that going forward, that we can't afford the educational model that we've been using for the last 50 years going forward. The budget of the schools in its current format is outpacing our ability to pay for them. So we're going to have to really think outside the box going forward and hire a superintendent in particular who can be very creative about reinventing an educational model. If there's any city who has the ability to do it, I think it's going to be Newton, and we're going to have to do that.
Let me bring this back to Sue then with the question that's sort of been raised here. Once you take the financial piece off the table, is it teacher training? Lee asked, for example, whether the early release days are the best way of doing teacher development. Do you feel like there are other things that we've been failing to do to bring out the best in our teachers, to attract the best teachers, or to retain
We
the
have
best
cut
teachers?
professional development substantially over the years. I forget if it was about 4 years ago, maybe a little bit. It might have been 5 years ago. The professional development was cut quite substantially in order to benefit class size. Something had to give, and that was the trade-off that was
I
made.
guess what I'm asking, though, is beyond the financial questions about money being shifted around, are there better ways of doing things that you would argue for?
There might be.
Let me reframe the question. We have from the vice chair of the Citizens Advisory Group saying there's going to be financial pressure. The schools aren't going to get all the money that they want. We still want to have the best schools around. So what can we do that won't cost more money to make our teachers better, to retain, to attract, to improve the curriculum?
Well, I think there are a number of things, actually. I worked on this a little with the strategic planning. There are things like developing career ladders. I think it's master teachers, they call them. What teachers also want is the ability to move around a little. Right now, if you're a teacher and you can either switch grades or whatever, or you can be an administrator. And there's a lot in between that we can create for teachers to give them some job satisfaction and for them to take their knowledge that makes the good teachers especially good, to share it among all the others. I mean, I think when we talk about education, we can talk about the actual content, like with the MCAS, or we can talk about how it's done, professional development, how teachers teach, the pedagogy. And then there's the whole structure of the school system, which is what you're getting at with SPED. So there are actually these three parts, and we can kind of move them around and everything. And I'm sure there are always going to be opportunities for us to improve, and we should always be open-minded to that. And I do hope a new superintendent, or even the interim superintendent, would have some great ideas that we can follow up on.
Okay. I believe that with the next superintendent, it's important that he comes from a background where he's faced difficult financial situations in his position and was able to overcome it with different solutions. And that should be one of the main questions that the school committee asks the superintendent, the different candidates out there, so that when we select the person, he'll be the right person for the job. And these tough financial issues, and also what's happening with the academics that are going on in the school systems, are very important issues to look at. And we need to improve education while being able to control the different finances that are going on.
Lee, you raised an interesting question in terms of what we should be seeking in our next superintendent. And since I think I think everyone on the panels mentioned the qualifications of the new superintendent, let me ask all of you. I'll start with Lee. What you think we need in a new superintendent? Should we find someone who's an experienced superintendent, or should we look at people who've never been a superintendent before but have, as Ruthanne put it, the ability to think outside the box? I'm not suggesting that you think that we should take someone who's never been a superintendent before, but what kind of a person should we be looking for?
It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's been a superintendent in the past, but they do have to have a good financial background and the ability of having overcome different challenges in the past, who can look at the school system now, look at our current budget and the way everything's being allocated, and can come up with solutions. Obviously, this next superintendent should care about the MCAS and be able to look at it as a way to monitor whether school children are learning what they're supposed to.
I guess I'll focus on the school committee candidates here. What do you think, Sue?
Oh, I actually do disagree. I would like someone to have some superintendent experience. I don't consider this a starter position for a new superintendent. We're I think it's the 8th largest community in Massachusetts? 11th largest. But we certainly have high standards and $165 million budget.
Is that geographical or population?
Population.
And school population, I wonder if, I thought it was 8th. Maybe we've gone down. To me, it's really important that this person be an educational leader. It's nice. Of course, you want someone who can be, who can manage the budget.
Yeah.
But hopefully, there will be other people. I actually like the idea of a CFO as well in the school system, who can help manage that financial side. I mean, the main focus of the school system is what happens in the classroom, what the child gets out of it. And we need someone to lead the system who really knows how to make that happen properly, and how to inspire teachers so that what they give the children goes above and beyond what happens in other places. So for me, it's really important that we have an educational leader. And yes, someone who can manage the budget, but there will be other people with those skills around to assist with that. For me, communication is really important. I think that there's some mistrust. I mean, we've talked about this earlier in the evening, and I really think two-way communications, frequent communications, is really would help.
Someone with good. So when you say someone with good communication skill, are you suggesting that Jeff Young didn't have good communication skill?
No.
The reason why I ask is I thought of that as being his main skill.
He is, and when he presents, he does amazing presentations. But I would love for someone who might be willing to do some work online, maybe not a blog necessarily, or maybe it's like a whole Ed Center blog where, once a week, I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas, but there are innovation ideas.
Okay, you can do the innovation ideas.
There we go.
There you go.
Having once a week, it's someone's responsibility to answer a question from the public. Like we always get every year, there's someone who asks, what do the curriculum coordinators do?
I ask that every time I meet every budget, and I still haven't gotten a good answer.
Wouldn't you like an answer? Someone
Would
to
you
say,
like to explain
here's what curriculum coordinators do. Well, you really want me to explain?
Yeah.
Well,
I've asked someone on the last show. I'm still not exactly clear on that.
We have 15 elementary schools feeding into 4 middle schools, feeding into 2 high schools. You can't have 15 elementary schools each doing something different in those schools, because when those kids come together, those 6th grade teachers are not going to be able to begin with all the kids at the same level, the same knowledge. Like they can't necessarily, I forget what the curriculum is in 6th grade, But they can't, in a science, unless they know that the kids are coming in from elementary school with a certain knowledge.
So what do the
They can't
curriculum coordinators
The
do?
curriculum coordinators, in a way, it's that bad word, that standardization across the community. So they know that every...
Do they tell the teachers what to teach then?
Well, they said, some of that comes from MCAS. So every third grade
Right, that's why.
does some project about the Native Americans, or does I'm trying to think what, my daughter just finished fourth grade, I'm trying to think what she did. All the second grades, I believe, do some sort of butterfly project for science. How it's taught, this is where we get into what is taught versus how it's taught. How it's taught is very different. I think there's a lot of flexibility that the teachers
So, okay,
have.
let me ask the basic question, and this is the thing I never really, I've heard this explained so many times, and I've never really understood it. How is third grade math any different in Newton than it is in Wellesley or Lincoln or Weston or anything? Why
That I
can't we
can't
just have, why can't we all have the same third grade math curriculum in the EDCO consortium, or just say we're going to work it out and not all need a math coordinator in our own city and town?
I mean, that's something to
bureaucracies.
consider. I mean, that's something to consider, whether there's a way to coordinate regionally. I was actually just reading this state report on municipal reform, and one of the things was talking about regionalization of a lot of services. I hadn't
Anyway,
really thought about it.
I do
think
want
those are all
to.
ideas.
No, well, thank you for taking care of that segment. I think we've got a minute or two left, so let me very, very quickly do a closing commentary on something that's been on my mind recently, which is the recent decision to close the recycling center at Rumford Ave. This is the books and technology recycling facility, and it struck me as a little confusing that they were saying that they closed it down because people were taking whole boxes of books or taking things without picking things up, and some of us drop things off without taking anything. So it seems to me that the system's working if people are taking my old computer or my old box of books, and even if they are taking a couple boxes of books and selling them on eBay, more power to them in this economy. And frankly, I think that's great. It's keeping it out of the waste stream, and we have to pay a significant amount per ton for everything we throw out. So I'd much rather have those books end up in somebody's hands and hopefully being read by someone than in an incinerator or even in a recycling bin being turned into pulp where there's a lot of energy involved in recycling them if I threw them in my recycling bin. So I've actually filed a discussion docket item with the Board of Aldermen asking for the formulation of a resolution to the mayor that would essentially ask that he reopen the Rumford Ave Recycling Center, because I think it's a valuable service to Newton residents. It's good for the environment, and in this difficult economic time, if people are making a buck that way, I think that's great too. So anyway, I know we're getting near the end of our hour. It does go by quickly. I want to thank our wonderful panel. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
And thank you,
Thank
Ruthanne.
you, Ken.
And I want to thank you for watching, and also, of course, our wonderful crew that makes every episode of Common Ground possible. And so please join us again next time, August 6th, when we try to find just a little bit more common ground.